Kia ora, nau mai hoki mai anō kia tapatahi. Welcome to the program. It's Monday, 18th of May. You're with Māori Television's morning news program, Tapatahi. Thanks for joining us. Well, coming up on the program, there is one new confirmed COVID-19 case, and today 800,000 children head back to the classroom. Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, joins us. National's finance spokesperson Paul Goldsmith is also with us to discuss the government's budget, and the winner of the Race Unity National Speech Awards is with us.
You see, when part A of me took what the other once had, lied, deceived, part B became mad. After some speeches, some alcohol and ill-fitting prose, part A went and stole, which we forgot to disclose. So easily, so simply, as quick as could be, and boom, suddenly we became a colony.
But first, here's Pōtaka Maipi with the news.
Tēnā koe Shane, mōtarau ata Mārie e Tiwi. Kua tūwhera anō ngā kura I raro I te taumata ōhiti tuarua e matapai ai te tāhuhu o te mātauranga ko ngā tamariki katoa e ono ki te 11 tau te pakeke ka taki hoki atu ki te kura. Kei te huro ngā mātua ki te tuku anō I o ārātau tamariki, engari kei te whai ētahi tikanga whakatūpato ake.
I'll miss being in a space where we can focus on the priorities, and I think that's something we'll take away, is that we kind of jam-pack our lives too much, and we'll try not to do that again.
They're ready, I'm ready, and I'm not a school teacher, so they definitely need to get back there for their learning.
Kia kaha. He kai ngākau nui ōna kia whai reo tūturu ai te kāinga I te whare pāremata. Koina tā Miria Mino, Kapa Kingi, te kaitono hau, kua tohua I te Pāti Māori, hei whakataitai te tūru Māori o te taitokerau.
It's much about acknowledging who you are and what they know you've done, where they know you've succeeded, and even where they know you've failed. You know, and they love you anyway, and they trust you to carry their voice, which means I have to listen more. I have to listen and understand and be able to carry that and fight for that.
Maria Meno Kapakingi. Ko Vodafone rātau ko te wehi haka, kei te mahi tahi ki te whakatena I ngā iwi o te motu, kia tū tapatahi tonu I te wā o te mate uru tānei. Ko tohu marau haka Experience Challenge, he kapa kaupapa ma te ipurangi kei te tuku ma te haka, te āhua o te manua roa, o te aroha e whakatitina I roto I ngā hau kino o te wā.
Te wā I tau mai tēnei mate uru tā, ko rongo tātou te ngau o tēnei taniwha. Nō reira, ko toko ake te whakaaro me tuhi I tētahi haka, hei whakahiki wairua, hei whakakotahi tātou I a tātou.
Ko tāpeta wehi tērā. Ko Jess Jenkins no Ngāti Kahununu Ngāti Pākehā hoki te toa o tētahi whakataitai āmotu I tana whakamahi I tōna tuakiritanga hei kauwhau I te āhua o te onomata I te anamata hoki o te whakawhanaungatanga āiwi I Aotearoa nei. He akonga pai te kaumātoru a Jenkins I te kura tuarua o tāua ka whakapuakitia, marunga tiriata pukumata hoki, ko ia te toa o ngā whiringa whakamutunga o ngā tohu kauhau I te kotahitanga o ngā iwi.
I stand complete, yet I am divided. I speak in the tongue of the obvious, yet I am verbally illiterate in my other. For I have been suppressed, I have been cheated, I have been deceived.
Ko te Tira Community-Based Assessment Centre I Opotiki, he mea arataki te Māori ngā toa o tētahi whakataitai ā-hāpori, marunga TikTok. Ko te mahi whakatata kanikani te wero, ko tā rātau I pōtihia ai. Ko te wāhanga ki e kai ngā kau nui tiana ki ngā Pākeke. Huri ake ana ki te hākinakina kei te hoki atu ngā kai tākoro whutupōro super ki te whakaharatau ākapa, ki te whakangungu i te tinana i te rānei, i mua i te whakataetai Super Rugby Aotearoa ka timata hei te 13 o hune. Kāti, koira ngā kōrero mō tēnei haora me hoki kia tapatahi.
Tēnā koe pōtaka o tira tēnā no tātou. To our first story this morning, 800,000 children returned to the classroom today after nearly 8 weeks being at home. This comes at a time when one new case of COVID-19 has been confirmed of a boy under the age of 4. The case is linked to the Rosewood Rest Home cluster in Christchurch and is a household contact of an earlier person who had the virus. The Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, joins me now. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Atamarie.
Atamarie ki a koe hoki. I was surprised to hear about the toddler case, but even more surprised to hear that there are others. How many toddlers do we know that have tested positive over the last few weeks?
Well, a relatively small number overall of our total cases, which are nearing 1,150, a relatively small number are in children. And this case was, as you've described, was a household contact. So has actually been living with other household members who have been infected, very mild symptoms, and was just picked up after becoming slightly symptomatic. And we have seen this in some of our cases over the last week or two, that they're quite a long way down the track at the end of, as we say, the long tail of a cluster of cases. So no risk to the wider population here, but does show that that main place where we do see transmission is inside the family household.
I suppose I was surprised because there hasn't been that much focus on the age breakdown of those that have tested positive. Is that fair? Is there more information now being made available, Dr. Bloomfield? I suppose is my question.
Yes, so every day we publish on our website all the cases and a little bit of information about each of them. There's a long list of every case on our Ministry of Health website. And we also do breakdown by ethnicity, by age group. And certainly this under 20 age group, and in particular the under 10 age group, is the group where we've seen the lowest number of cases, but they are still there. Of course, a number of the teenagers were associated with the cluster at the Marist College in Auckland, and we did the follow-up testing of that school community over the last couple of weeks, and did find a couple of students who had evidence of having been infected, but probably several weeks ago. This virus does stick around. What isn't clear is whether it's infectious. We treat these kids as if they're infectious, but it's very unlikely they are that late in the illness.
We're talking about our kids because it is a big day for children right across the country. 800,000 are expected to return to the classroom today. How prepared are schools for today?
Oh, I think schools are very prepared. Remembering that most of them have had at least some children back for several weeks now, including under Alert Level 3. And they were given a good period of notice for this move down to Alert Level 2. There is very good guidance available, and the Ministry of Education has been working with schools. I think that they're well prepared, they know what's expected, and I think students also know. They've been following what's been happening over the last few weeks at home, and I imagine the excitement levels are pretty high. I've got one heading off to school this morning and can't wait to see his mates.
And we'll talk about that shortly. However, there is quite a big shift, though, isn't there? As you say, and as you point out, some kids have already been at school for the last couple of weeks or so. But going from 5 or 6 kids, or a very small number of kids, to literally hundreds is quite a big shift, right, for schools?
It is a big shift. It's getting back to what they are used to doing. So there's nothing unusual in them having the schools filled again. As I heard one principal say this morning, it'll be a bit like the first day of the school year again. But they are ready. And the other thing I think that's very important here is whether it's for our schools, our workplaces, our retail settings and so on, the most important thing here is we've worked hard to really break the chain of transmission for this virus. And even with our high rates of testing right around the motu over the last few weeks, we still haven't uncovered any hidden pockets. We're going to maintain our watchful position there. People need to remain vigilant, but the work we have put in, that mahi over the last 6, 7, 8 weeks as a country means we can be really confident sending our kids back to school that it is safe to do so.
Let's talk about the shift to level 2. This is day 5 since we shifted to alert level 2. When will we know how safe things are under alert level 2 and whether or not indeed we are ready to move to level 1? And I ask that question because, 5 days in, what sort of advice are you getting around the time that we will need to wait to actually see whether or not we're sticking to the rules and that there is no outbreak or further outbreak or new outbreak of community transmission?
Sure. Well, the 14 days is an important marker because we know that's the outer edge of a transmission cycle of COVID-19. I think that one thing that's encouraging is we've now had 2 weeks in alert level 3 plus the 5 days in alert level 2, and we're not seeing those cases increase. We're still just seeing this tail of cases from our known outbreaks. And so that's very encouraging, but it will take a good 2 weeks before we see whether, if there is infection still lurking out there, it starts to pop up. And as you may recall, the Prime Minister said Cabinet would review things after 2 weeks, in particular to look at the maximum number of people that can get together. It's 10 at the moment, aside from that exception around funerals and tangihanga. So the aim would be a couple of weeks in, if everything's looking good, to be able to increase that number up. And of course, we know that when it's fully implemented, alert level 2, up to 100 people can get together.
So does that mean that at the end of the 2 weeks, if there haven't been any new cases or any evidence of community transmission, that we could see rules and regulations relaxed?
Certainly around that maximum number of people that can get together, and I'm sure everyone's looking forward to that as well. But again, there is a message here. If we look at other countries and what's happened, we don't want to rush into this. Stepping our way into it is the way to go. We don't want to be flip-flopping between alert level 2, 3, or even 4. And so steady as she goes here, I think people will adapt to alert level 2 well, and then we can start to increase the numbers if things are looking good.
What about alert level 1? Is that currently part of your thinking and consideration in terms of what that may look like?
Oh, absolutely, starting to look at what that could be. And of course, there are a number of things on the table. One of them is this opportunity or the possibility of a trans-Tasman bubble with Australia. And of course, that's going to require a lot of work to get in place the sorts of measures both countries would want to have to do that. It would have great advantages, of course, for both countries in terms of tourism, for both our economies. So these are the sorts of things we're working through, as well as what alert level 1 might look like, how different that would be to alert level 2. And of course, we keep a close eye on what's happening, not just inside New Zealand, but around the whole world, and what the experiences of other countries who are easing restrictions.
I was in Hawke's Bay at the weekend and I was surprised to learn that you still need a referral to be tested in the Bay. And that's not the case, certainly here in Tāmaki Makaurau in Auckland. Why is that?
Oh, well, DHBs have got slightly different arrangements around the country. Many have got CBACs out in the community-based assessment centres, and people can just turn up. Others have got designated general practices in some areas that are doing the testing, and so that will be a different arrangement. But for people who have symptoms and feel they need a test, ringing Healthline or ringing your regular GP, and they will put you on to either a CBAC or somewhere where you can get the testing if they don't do it themselves.
Why the different approach though? If I'm in Hawke's Bay, there's a different rule for those that are living, for example, here in Auckland when it comes to testing.
Well, what's not different is that testing is widely available and it's free. In fact, it's free not just for New Zealanders, but it's free for people who are visitors or residents. What we want to do is make sure testing is accessible, that cost isn't a barrier. And of course, the great thing here in New Zealand is we have got that testing capacity. In fact, New Zealand's, of all countries in the world, has got the highest number of tests per case confirmed. It's a great figure to be. So it means we have done that wide testing, and that's part of our confidence that we're not missing pockets of COVID-19 out in the community.
So what does that mean for whānau in Hawke's Bay? Do they still need to seek a referral before they go and get tested, or can they simply turn up at a testing site or station and be tested?
Well, I think the advice I gave stands. I don't know what the arrangements are in every DHB around the country, but what I can say is if you ring Healthline or if you ring your regular general practice or your Māori health provider, they will advise, and if you have the symptoms, they will be able to refer you and tell you where you can get a test.
Can we talk briefly about these testing stations? We understand that some of the Māori operated CBECs or testing stations may be forced to close soon. Are you aware of that advice that's been given to some of these Māori testing stations?
What I'm aware of is that each DHB is working with us about what the role of CBECs will be as we go into this next phase in Alert Level 2. There is a number of things like even the use of PPE, which at the moment is geared for Alert Level 4, but that will be different in Alert Level 2, general use of PPE, even in our hospitals. So we're looking at all these things. I think that the folks who've been running the CBECs have done an outstanding job, doing 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, sometimes 7,000 swabs a day around the country. It will really just depend on what sort of testing we need to maintain over this autumn-winter period, particularly if we're remaining in Alert Level 2 or even going down to Alert Level 1. And that won't, and whether or not Māori providers remain doing the swabbing, it won't be just particular to them, but it might be other CBECs in the community as well that we wind back and just put on hold till we might need them again.
Sure, and I wholeheartedly agree with you in regards to the great work that they have been doing, especially in our Māori communities. It just sounds a bit unusual as to why they might be forced to close down, given testing is such still a priority for the government.
It is a priority. It's just that the testing will be different through Alert Level 2. There are many fewer people with symptoms because we've actually broken the chain of transmission, not just of COVID-19, but of other respiratory illnesses. And our testing then shifts to this, what we call surveillance sentinel testing. So we're testing the population around the place, people who aren't symptomatic. And it may well be the Māori providers can continue to play an important role there. The other thing we're interested in is what else can those providers do as well as the testing if they're going out into those other communities. For example, we're worried about throat swabs for rheumatic fever and kids who might be symptomatic with a sore throat. There may be other health care services they can deliver. So we're looking at it in a more holistic way. I think the Māori providers have done an outstanding job, certainly from the feedback I'm getting around the place. And what we want to look at is how do we best use them and how do we best use those mobile services to look at perhaps a range of health services that could be delivered out in communities.
Can I just ask you briefly about your own schedule? Has that relaxed in any way, given we're now at Alert Level 2, or is it still pretty hectic for you?
Oh, I'm not expecting it to ease back too much. As you can see, I didn't even have time for a haircut over the weekend, but I dare say it was the first weekend where we didn't have a big paper we were preparing and a big decision to be made on the Monday. So it was a little bit more relaxed and it was great to get out and meet up with some friends I hadn't seen for a couple of months.
Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, I hope you get some time today or over the next couple of days to get that haircut. Thank you so much, as always, for joining the program. Tēnā koe.
Kia ora.
And we'd love to know your thoughts on today's program. Please let us know. Post your feedback on our Facebook page or send us an email, tapatahi@māoritelevision.com. Coming up after the break, Nationals' Paul Goldsmith joins us to discuss the government's $50 billion budget and what it means for you. Kia ora and welcome back. The government is spending $265 million on the sport and recreation sector to ensure it remains viable and adapts in the wake of COVID-19. In announcing the funding, Finance and Sports Minister Grant Robertson said the coronavirus had resulted in much of the sector's funding dry up and has put sports, particularly at a community level, under immense strain. Nationals Finance Minister Paul Goldsmith joins me now. Tēnā koe and welcome to the program.
Good morning, how are you?
Very good, thank you. What do you think, first of all, about the most recent budget announcement in regards to sports?
Oh, look, I think a lot of people in the sports sector have certainly been struggling. The question mark is how effective are we going to be at getting that money down to the sports roots, to the clubs, to the communities, and there's a big question mark about that. Look, you get the sense that every day there's going to be a few more 100 million going out the door. And that's nice to the people who receive it. But I think New Zealanders will be also asking the question, heck, how are we going to pay for all this? And what's it going to mean? And I think that was the big overarching question left by the budget.
And we'll certainly talk about that shortly. Yeah. I just want to go back to the sports package because, as you point out, quite rightly so, there is a question around how that money is going to get out into the community. In terms of the way in which it's been allocated from sports community, from that level right through to the elite level, is that something that you support?
Look, I haven't been able to go deep into the details. My colleague Nikki Kay has been working most closely with the sector. Look, the only point I'd say is that most of the announcements in the budget have just had figures attached. Yes, we're going to spend 200 and something odd million, and the detail is pretty sketchy. So it's quite hard to work out exactly whether it makes sense or not. There's a slight tendency to think that the announcement is the critical thing, and the sum of money is the critical thing. But where it goes, and what the basis is behind where they put it, and what they're planning to actually get for the money for taxpayers who are stumping it up is. It's all vague as far as I can see.
And I take that point that it is a bit vague. Certainly, we're not seeing a lot of policy attached to the numbers that have been shared. But isn't that understandable given what the government has been through over the last few weeks? They've had to follow a very, very different budget process, a process that you're very familiar with, that would have been done and dusted weeks, if not months ago. But this budget here, given the circumstances, has literally been done in the last few weeks, right? So you can understand why there may not be as much detail.
Yes, but you don't necessarily have to panic in a time like this either. We have a very large and effective Treasury Department, and you would expect that they would be insisting on rigour in all the spending that we're having, and right throughout the budget, like I say, there are lots of big numbers announced, but you've got to have a plan to actually deliver whatever you're talking about, and for it to make a difference. I would make the point that this time last year, the big budget announcement, you'll recall, was 1.9 billion for mental health, and a lot of people said yes, that makes very good sense, but a year on, I'd encourage you to talk to people across the sector. Most of that money still hasn't been allocated. They haven't worked out what they're doing. It seems the pattern is to say, yep, we're going to announce a big figure, we're going to solve a big problem, and then after the announcement, we'll figure out how we're going to do it and how we're going to spend it and what the priorities are. And I don't think that's a very good way to go about public policy.
I'm interested to know your feedback on the Māori-specific budget package that was announced on Thursday, $900 million. Have you had the chance to look over that detail?
Yes, and again, it's a large sum broken down. We had Willie Jackson's area in Mana and Mahi, which is a scheme that, frankly, I was briefly the employment minister in the previous government, and I was always a little bit surprised that one of the first things that the government announced was that they were going to put, way back 2 years ago, that they were putting $80 million into Mana and Mahi. And on the very same day that they announced that, they also said that they were doing away with 90-day trials for new employees. And since that, they've also, just about every year, massively increased the minimum wage. Well, those two things don't go together very well, because the people most affected by those decisions are young Māori trying to get into employment. Because if you think of it from the point of view from an employer, are they going to take a risk on somebody that they don't, with a background, might not have all the qualifications, might not have a work history, may be taking a chance? And you're less likely to take a chance on a new employer if you haven't got that 90-day trial as an option. And if the minimum wage is so high that you're paying them a huge amount, and if you're taking a risk. So, so our attitude is to say, well, why don't we actually make it easier for employers to take a punt on hiring somebody rather than necessarily coming up with massively expensive scheme to subsidise employers and at the same time come up with a whole lot of legislation which makes it more expensive and more risky to take them on.
But
So,
isn't it a good thing, though,
philosophical
to
difference.
provide funding? Sorry to interrupt you, but isn't it a good thing to be providing support and funding for Māori to learn a trade?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of money being spent on that, and that's a very important project. And generally across the board, we're supportive of the funding that's gone into trades training. That's it's an area which is under an enormous amount of turmoil at the moment. I don't know if you've been following the polytech sector. Chris Hipkins, the minister, has instituted a massive review and turned everything upside down on its head, and they're creating a central new agency. And so my own slight concern in that area is that we can talk about spending 1.6 billion across the board on apprentices, but if the sector itself is still in a state of upheaval, it may be quite difficult to deliver those. So that's the basic sort of theme. Is easy to make announcements, but how do you actually deliver the stuff?
Sure, but let's touch on another key element of the Māori specific budget or package, $200 million to Kohanga Reo. Now, that was something that under your government, the previous government, wasn't sorted or addressed, and yet this government has been able to do that.
Oh, well, and I'm sure they'll get plenty of encouragement and support for that from families who send their children to Kohanga Reo, and so all the very best there. We've got a $50 billion budget, of course, so that sum is part of that, and it's to the extent to which, I mean, the judgment we made when we looked at the budget overall was, if you're spending good quality money on health and education, you get a tick from us, and if you're investing in things that will help save jobs and grow the economy, you get a big tick. Everything else, I think we need to put the slide rule over and make sure it still makes sense at a very difficult time. So, in general rule, we're supportive of the investment in education. Like everything, though, you need to have the evidence to show that it's working and it's delivering the results. But if you can, then good luck.
Paul Goldsmith, thank you for joining us this morning. We do appreciate your time.
Pleasure.
And of course, we'd like to know what you think. Please let us know on our Facebook page or send us an email, tapatahi@maoritelevision.com. Kia huri ake tātou I nāia nei ki ngā tai pito pito te wā.
Tēnā koe Shane ata Māori e te iwi. Ki te whakaputanga te manatū haura, ko tahi te tūroro ma te korona hou i ngā haura rua te kaumā whākua pahure. He tūroro whai pānga ki te kāhui o Rosewood i o Tautahi. He kainoho ki te whare o tētahi tūroro o mua. Nā ko nā ka eke te tōpūtanga o ngā tūroro o Aotearoa tūturu mai tūpono atu ki te kotahi mano e whārau e iwa te kaumaiwa. Kua tuwhara anō ngā kura i raro i te taumata ohiti tuarua e mata pai ai te tāhuhu o te mātauranga ko te rāhui o ngā tamariki, ko te 800 mano ngā akonga ka hoki taki atu ki te kura. He nā kau nui ona kia whai reo tūturu ai te kāinga i te wharepare mata. Koina tā Maria Meno Kapakingi, te kaitono hou kua tohua e te Pāti Māori, hei whakataitai i te tūru Māori o te tai tokerau. Ko Vodafone rātou ko te wehi haka, kei te mahitahi ki te whakatenatena i ngā iwi o te motu, kia tū tapatahi tonu i te wā o te mate uru tānei. Ko Tohu Marau Haka Experience Challenge, he kaupapa mā te ipurangi, kei te tuku mā te haka, te āhua o te manoaroa, o te aroha e whakatītina i roto i ngā hau kino o te wā. A kāti, koe nā tā te ao Māori e pupuru nei mo tēnei wā, ka hoki ki a koe Shane.
Kia ora anō, tātou katoa. Well, back to the budget, the Treasury is leading the government's Reset, Rebuild and Recovery economic response. Trevor Moike is the Principal Advisor for Crown Māori Capability at Treasury and joins me now. Tēnā koe te rangatira.
Ata Māori e mōrena, tēnā tātou.
Describe the environment that you're now working in as a senior public official in these pretty unprecedented times. What has changed for you since COVID-19?
Well, like many, the people went to town to work in downtown, proximate to the other policy shops and the other ministries. And for some time now, we've been all locked down, working from home, virtual working in these kinds of digital environments, and working pretty fast, Jane. Kia ora.
I want to just briefly touch on what happens behind the scenes. So on Thursday last week, big budget announcement, right? $50 billion package that's been shared, and we continue to see announcements coming out from the government. But we know that a lot takes place, a lot happens behind the scenes in order for this big machine to be able to do what it needs to do. This year's budget process would have been quite different to the processes, right, that you've been used to in previous years.
That's right. Often in a normal budget cycle, by the time we get to the beginning of the year, much of the shape of the the next budget is pretty well being moulded, shaped, detailed, and it's really down to the finalising of some of that as we go on. And in other parts of your bulletin this morning, of your kaupapa this morning, it's all been concertinaed into a very, very short period of time, given the pandemic and the implications for us. And so teams all over the capital city and other parts have been co-working, locked down, doing many hours to make sure the detailing and make sure the understandings across in the Cabinet Committee and others could be put into place for last week's announcements. So it's been a pretty busy time here, and it's been a pretty busy time across the teams of the Treasury and other parts of the government. So quite unusual in that sense of how much compressed time to reshape and get this kind of package out into good shape.
And I think it's important to shine the light on that work that is done by those that work within the public service, because many people watching the program today certainly won't be aware of just how much work goes into a budget over 6, 9, 12 months leading up to a budget, let alone over the days before a budget is announced. And I just want to acknowledge and recognise the work that is done or carried out by Māori and non-Māori public servants, because I can only appreciate what type of work and how much work has been required to get this budget out. So I just wanted to say that. Where is your focus at the moment in terms of working inside Treasury and some of these key announcements that have been made, Māori specific and more indirect funding as well, and trying to get that funding out and to iwi, to communities, to Māori?
So thanks for the note about the acknowledgement of people's efforts to get this kind of thing done. People need to work in teams, and that's what's been occurring. And in those kinds of arrangements, Shane, we're looking for leadership across thinking and policy. The Treasury's job is to be the main economic advisor. And so we gather information and insights from a range of areas. And so now as we're poised to kind of get this new spend into place, you can see that there have been tranches or waves as we've gone along. And part of our role is to also see that across Te Ao Māori and across the Māori economy and across some of the asset bases and some of the Māori businesses, that we've got insights around how these spending packages are going to impact and what kind of policy we need to make sure it gets to the right place at the right time. And we've got plenty of precedents. Some of the work of the PGF and other things, whilst not exclusively located into the Vote Māori budget, that's an example where right across the whenua there have been various new developments and various new projects put into place. And so as we go forward, the focus is on the recovery, the intensity around jobs, the holding of the national arrangements while the rest of the globe is working itself out. People have talked incessantly about tourism as a big example. In a sense, it's going to be a while before large loads of jets with passengers and big boats will be coming. And so this just a recalibrating, almost like a sense in as we get out of level 3 into level 2 and onward, Shane, that it's the new normal time. And I think for Te Ao Māori, that brings us to some challenges and opportunities with the large asset bases that we have in play. So we've just been keen to keep those channels open. There's quite a lot of partnering conversations and conversations across in ministers. They've been connecting and communicating, but also around some of our policy work, we've been making sure that we're keeping those channels open. We're engaging around these things, and so that we can get it right. Māoridom, as you know, the primary sector is a very big driver of both the current economy, the pre-COVID economy, and it looks like as we go forward, that will be a big driver for how we recover, how we reset our economy, and how we rebuild it. And so if you think about that for Te Ao Māori, that's got whenua, it's got whakapapa, it's got whanaungatanga written all over it. And we're just keen to make sure that in the rollout that's ahead of us, we're connecting on all sorts of those levels.
Finally, I do want to ask you, wearing your iwi leaders hat if I can, and I appreciate that you are on the program this morning as your day-to-day mahi, your treasury mahi, but as an iwi leader of Kahungunu, as an iwi leader full stop, what is the biggest opportunity in this as we move into this recovery phase out of COVID-19 for Māori?
I think just in that, in speaking just now, in terms of the Eastern Seaboard, in terms of the iwi, the opportunities are actually in the name of your program, Tapatahi. And Tapatahi is the solution in the sense that we look to Wellington to partner, but also there's opportunities across whakapapa and whanaungatanga and whenua to partner, because it's in that collectivising that we can make progress together. And I think that needs to be one of the things. And the second thing, Shane, perhaps the last thing is we've got quite conservative balance sheets and we need to sweat them a little bit more, take on a bit of a load so that more jobs are here now to whāngai mokopuna atona wā. Sorry about that.
Trevor Moike, a pleasure to talk to you this morning. Tēnā rawa tūkoe.
Ka mihi kia koutou. Tēnā koe.
800,000 children head back to the classroom today after spending nearly 8 weeks at home. The principal of St Dominic's Catholic College in West Auckland joins me now. Tēnā koe, Anna Swan. Welcome to the program.
Kia ora. Thank you. Nice to be here.
How are you feeling about today?
Personally, really excited. Really excited. Feels like a whole summer holidays all over again with not having the girls here. It's been not easy these last few weeks, but certainly a huge learning curve for all of us. But we're just really excited that we get to have the girls back today.
And I suspect that level of excitement will be shared widely amongst the girls, right? Returning back to school today to see their friends and to socialise and all that the first day back at school brings.
Yeah, very much so. I know most of the girls are really excited. There's still a bit of fear out there and some heightened anxiety for a lot of our girls, but we're working with that. Our priority, we've said from the beginning, and we've been in communication with our whānau the whole way through our lockdown, and has been about the well-being of the girls and of their families. There's been some huge trauma that's happened in a lot of our families, just like across New Zealand. Family members getting sick, family members overseas passing away. So we've got a lot to deal with. We're prioritising the well-being, and the learning will come. The learning will happen.
What does that literally look like when you focus on the well-being?
Really making sure they know it's going to be okay, but also knowing we're trying really hard to communicate across to our girls that it's not the same. So things are different when they come back. Things that we've put in place to make sure it looks different, because we don't want them to think it's back to things as normal. Things are not normal. We're having to go backwards a little bit. We've separated desks. We don't like doing that, but just to make them realise that things are a little bit different, but it's going to be okay. We're going to have extended pastoral time this morning so that they're with those teachers closest to them, to spend a lot of time just really unpacking what the last few weeks have been like for them, And knowing too that our staff are also a lot of them are feeling very anxious about what's happened. It's been a long time since we've been in the classroom. We're really prioritising how the kids are, where they're at now and where we're going to go to. We're not looking back on what's been missed. It's just we're seeing that as quite irrelevant. But it's really looking after them, making sure that mentally and emotionally they're okay. We've had some families where jobs have been lost, so there's huge financial impact there too. So it's really trying to support our families, support our girls, support our staff so that we can move forward.
Can I ask what work has been done with your staff? Obviously, the big focus today, right, is on the girls, is on your students and their family and their well-being. What have you done over the last few days, over the last few weeks to support your staff?
Our staff have been amazing. Our teachers and our support staff, they've been online this whole entire time with their students, upskilling themselves, self-teaching how to Zoom, how to conference, Google Meet, you name it, they can do it, and making sure that they're connecting with as many students as possible. So that's been the number one learning curve for us, is that our teachers are so flexible, so patient, so adaptive, and they're just getting on. We met on Friday, we had a reconnection day with our staff, and that was really good because we haven't been together. We've been together online, we've had social occasions online, but coming together in person has been really, really special. And knowing that we've got a real mix of anxiety there too, and that's okay, and that's completely normal. And for moving forward, the teachers are just really excited to get the girls back so they can reconnect with them and focus on them and what's important for them to move forward.
Now, of course, day one today, there are many more days, right, of the rest of the year. What does the rest of the year look like for your school? Your biggest focus at the moment is the well-being of the students, and will continue to be so, I dare say. But what does the rest of the year look like for you, and what type of challenge, or what are some of the challenges that you're looking at?
I guess one of the biggest things that's been highlighted for me and for us as a staff, I'm a huge advocate of equity. So over these last few weeks, certainly the ministry's worked really hard at trying to provide devices. I understand that and I appreciate it. We've sent out our own devices to students who perhaps didn't have their own or something had happened, but knowing that actually for some kids the device is no good because there's no Wi-Fi. So knowing that those kids actually need real extra special tender loving care, because they're going to not just have fallen behind, if you want, for lack of a better word, but also be feeling bad about that. So it's about making sure that they don't. And NCEA is a great program in that we can adapt it. It's flexible. We can move it around for the individual needs of each girl to make sure that they can do the very, very best for the rest of the year. So our teachers are targeting individual learning plans and making sure that they target and focus on where these girls are and what they need to get there.
COVID-19, as you say, has really shone a light on the inequities, that exist. And they certainly have in the case of education. What further challenge does that present you as a principal of a school in West Auckland?
Well, a lot of it comes down to financial impact, and that will have a financial impact on our school, and that will be on the ability for girls to take part in a lot of extracurricular stuff. There's going to be the impact even on the donations and contributions that we collect. I've had parents who have contacted me asking if they're better off taking their girl out of our school. And I've said, absolutely not. These girls are part of our family. This is our college whānau, and we are here to support you. There is a lot of fear in the community in everything in life. Life has changed. So we need to make this a safe place for our girls to return to, and somewhere that our families feel supported by.
Anna Swan, it sounds like you're going to have a great day today, welcoming all your girls back. And indeed, there are still challenges that you will indeed be facing. But thank you so much for joining us on the program. We really do appreciate your time.
Kia ora.
Coming up after the break, the winner of the Race Unity Speech Awards joins us. Kia ora and welcome back. Jess Jenkins from Ngāti Kahungunu has won the Race Unity Speech Awards. The theme of the national competition is Te Tiro Whakamuri Kia Anga Whakamua, or to face the future, look to the past. Here are some of the highlights of the speech given by the Tawa College student.
I stand complete, yet I am divided. I speak in the tongue of the obvious, yet I am verbally illiterate in my other. For I have been suppressed, I have been cheated, I have been deceived. But I am the oppressor, I am the cheater, the liar. I am lost in this present, confused, confuzzled. So I look back to the past only to find that I stumbled. You see, when part A of me took what the other once had, lied, deceived, part B became mad. After some speeches, some alcohol and ill-fitting prose, part A went and stole, which we forgot to disclose. So easily, so simply, as quick as could be, and boom, suddenly we became a colony. As a Māori with white skin, I don't personally experience it, but it pains me that so many people who are close to me do. Just as my white ancestors fought my Māori ones, racism exists here. We must first address the blatant separation occurring within society today in order to secure our ideal racism-free future.
Jess Jenkins joins me now. Tēnā koe, Jess, and congratulations.
Tēnā koe, thank you so much. So delighted to be here talking with you this morning.
What is your key message in your speech? We've just seen a bit of it, and boy, it's pretty strong. And you tell it with such conviction, and there's a really strong message in it. Tell us about that.
Ngā mihi. So yes, there's many messages in my speech actually, but I do focus on the conflict that I face within myself. You know, being Māori, being Pākehā, obviously being a Māori with white skin, it's very tough in Aotearoa society today to have this conflict, and I really wanted to express that through my speech and my kōrero, but also in the fact that I have this line, we are all immigrants sharing one whenua. We must reach a place of true unity. You know, we must reach a place where we are all considered equals that we are. We are all in the end, we are all immigrants here. We started out as Māori, and then came the Europeans, and then came everybody else, and so we are all together as one people, and we must realise this. We must address this. This is a very important issue, and I think that in essence is my speech, I guess.
Your choice of the word conflict, when you talk about your Māori side and your Pākehā side, is an interesting choice of word. And I'm interested as to understand why you presented it like that. Not to suggest that it's something foreign, because we certainly hear that view from many Māori and non-Māori, if I could say that. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, so the use of conflict is, in essence, quite an interesting word to use, I guess, because it is suggesting that there exists this conflicting nature within these two races or different parts of me and different aspects of society. In using the word conflict, what I'm talking about is the separation that I see within myself, within my past. Also within society today, how we have still conflicting messages and conflicting arguments that exist within different races and different cultures and different points of view, really. It's a cultural understanding that needs to be addressed, really, I think. Yeah, so that's the use of the word conflict.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask, well, I'm going to ask you, what is your advice in your speech about how we overcome that conflict, or how we use or take advantage of that conflict to create a better place to live for all the groups that you mentioned earlier?
Right, so I think the key to this is acceptance. We must first actually realise that this is a part of us. This is who we are. In Aotearoa, we come from a place of division. You know, we are not actually in a unified society as a nation. we must first realise that this is us. You know, this is an issue that is real. It is here, and it's not going to go away. It's something that we need to realise is here before we go and address the future. Now, I think the key is actually, you know, te tiro whakamuru kia a ngā whakamoa. To face the future, we must look to the past. So we must address this blatant separation occurring within society today and within our past in order to secure that ideal tomorrow.
Can we talk briefly about you? Are you returning to school today? Back to the classroom?
I am today. We start today, and I haven't got a watch on, but better hurry up. Might be late.
What are you looking forward to in your first day back in the classroom?
Honestly, seeing everyone and engaging with people on a level that's not virtually. It would be so nice to see all my kaiako, to talk to everyone, see all my friends. Yeah, honestly, just the engagement, the physical engagement. Obviously, no hugging. 1 metre distancing, definitely adhered to. But, yeah, just all the struggles that COVID-19 has brought to us as a nation. I feel that this students being back at kura is something that is going to kind of cement our new normal and help to start down that track of finding societal peace, I guess, again.
We're going to end today's program with a waiata that you and your two sisters, I understand, have written. Can you tell us about that waiata?
Yeah, so this waiata is something that I hold very, very close to my heart. It's something that I'm actually very proud of, and my sisters and I are very proud to be sharing this with you today. This is a waiata that we wrote in direct response to the absolutely heinous, horrific attack that occurred last year on March 15th, something that plagued Aotearoa and will plague us forever. And in our waiata, we start with two whakatauki that I'm going to share with you now. And those go, nā koutou I tangi, nā tātou katoa. So when we cry, your tears are shed by, when you cry, your tears are shed by us all. And then we go on to say, kia mau ki te tūmanaku, te whakapono, me te aroha. Hold fast to hope, faith and love. And this in essence is the song that we are sharing. And this is very appropriate to end my segment, I think, on the show with our song as I have just participated in the New Zealand Race Unity Speech Awards. So,
Jess, thank you so much again for joining us this morning. We do really appreciate your time. Congratulations again, and thank you for sharing such an important message, not only to New Zealand but to the world. Tēnā koe, thank you again.
Tēnā koe, kia ora.
And thank you, our guests, for joining us today, and you, our viewers, our listeners, for tuning in to Tapatahi this morning. We leave you with the waiata written and performed by Jess Jenkins and her sisters. Hei kona mō tēnei wā.
Gunshots, 550 taken away. I don't know what you did to deserve this. You are just here trying to live life, stolen from you in a house of prayer. This is so unfair. You should have been safe here. We can't take away the pain, so we'll come together again.
Unity is stronger